This is the 18th season of Bass Talk Live. With your host, Matt Pangrath. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Bass Cat Boats, AFCO, Duck It Fishing, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, and Pro Guide Batteries.
BTL, coming at you!
Welcome to Bass Talk Live. It is the final show of January 2022. And I decided I'm going to do things a little bit differently than we have, well, for the past 17 years, BTL, to close out each month. It's going to be a recap show, a highlight show of the guests, the topics covered, what went on with BTL for the previous month. And January was a big month. Like I said, Mark Jeffries retired. His last show was December 20th, 2021. And then we went into the 2022 season with a new look for BTL. And I have to say thank you. Seriously, a heartfelt thank you to all the listeners, viewers, people who have remained loyal and dedicated to the BTL brand that Mark Jeffries built over the course of his career and that I've been a part of for the past 13, 14 years. And I wasn't exactly sure what BTL would look like with the takeover starting in January with that first show. And I still don't know exactly what BTL is ultimately going to look like, taking a lot of feedback from listeners, from people who send emails and talk about, hey, you know, I really liked this aspect. I didn't like this aspect. And I take both of those in stride. I really appreciate that feedback because I want to continue to produce the best product in bass fishing, the best and longest running podcast and live streaming show covering the sport of bass fishing. So I went into January and I think had some really interesting guests that came on, some guys who really brought it, who took the time to really dive into their careers, to dive into baits, to dive into lures. And I'm looking forward to this growing as the season progresses, as the year progresses, and adding new elements and growing elements that are already working. So we've done 51 of the day fours with Frank Scalish, and that's going to continue. That's going to roll. That's going awesome. But just from the pure interview side of it, this is going to be a little bit of a recap show, and I'm going to take what I think are some of the best clips from the previous months of BTL and roll through them and kind of analyze them and go back and look at what that month encompassed. And the first show of the year I thought was very fitting to have nobody but Brad Hallman in studio. Brad has been a big influence in my life over the past couple of years, obviously been a big part of the Bass Zone and BTL for a number of years. And I've really never been able to spend a lot of time in the boat with Brad. We're always fishing against each other. We're always at the same events. We're always doing things that are together, but just not in the boat. And I got to fish a tournament with him on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and I was doing my dink and dunk thing, and then he pulled out an LBJ, and I realized, man, this is the first time that I've been in the boat with Brad where he's doing what he really likes to do, which is throw a little brown jig around docks, and I was able to do what I really like to do, which is dink and dunk with the Nico worm and a finesse style drop shot, Ned rig, that type of stuff. And it occurred to me, I don't ever really remember how Brad got into fishing the LBJ and what the origins of that story were. So to kick off the very first Bass Talk Live of the 2022 season is a real cool little clip of Brad Hallman talking about how he kind of discovered, evolved, and then turned the LBJ, the little brown jig, into something that he is synonymous for. So here's the first clip. This is the recap show for January 22 of BTL. Chris wants to know what the LBJ is.
Chris, you need to listen more, buddy.
It stands for Little Brown Jig. It's a little ball head jig that.
Yep.
When was the first time you threw that? Do you remember the first time you ever fished the LBJ? I don't think we've ever asked that.
I remember the first time I really learned about it. I mean, learned a lot. I was already throwing it. So Eakin's jig had come out and was popular for quite some time.
What time frame were we
In the
talking?
90s.
90s.
Yeah. And Mark Jeffries called me, and it was in the wintertime. And I was fishing a lot here in Oklahoma. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go fish the Central Pro-Am up in Missouri. You ought to come. I said, I've been thinking about that. They're 2-day events. And he's like, yeah. I said, I think I'm going to come up there and just ride with you and fish as a co-angler. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, man, when you looked at the field, dude, it was loaded with all those named guys, up there. And it was in the winter. Nothing was going on here.
Pro-Am reference in the first show.
Right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I go up there, meet Wes Endicott because we're staying with Wes.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I get to meet him. Of course, Wes is a big LBJ guy. So we go over a lot of stuff. Actually learned another knot because that's when fluorocarbon first came out.
Oh, it's horrible. I used Berkeley Vanish when it first came out.
Me too.
And I was like, no, I'm going back to big game.
I swear they called it Vanish because when you set the hook, your fish would vanish. That's why they named the line Vanish.
At first. The first run of the Berkeley Vanish.
Every hook set, break. But anyway, it was a lot about knots. Different knots that you could tie that would make the strength of that fluorocarbon better on hook sets, that early fluorocarbon. And Endicott had that down. So I learned a lot there.
What knot was it?
It was basically the Berkeley knot. It was a single line through the eye of the hook, and then you would go back, make another one with a loop around your finger, and then you twist up the line 5 or 6 like what your dad taught you, the old clinch knot, and then go back.
Trilene knot?
It was a trilene knot, yeah.
That's what you tie with the fluorocarbon.
That's what Endicott was tying, and that's what I started tying for quite a while after that. I don't tie that same knot now. But fluorocarbon's changed too. It's not the same as it was then. But anyway, long story short, I go to the meeting the first night, and I drew Jim Akins himself. Yeah. So took a seminar from him. I just sit on the back deck. By half the day, I wasn't there to catch a bass. I was there to learn. And, dude, I'd hit the gold mine. Dude, imagine this. I showed up at the boat to pick up your co-angler in the morning. This is a true story. He has to remember this. I mean, I've never picked up anybody like this in my life. You know how you meet at the dock in the morning? Mm-hmm. He's just already got his boat in the water. He said, I'll just pick you up on the end of the dock. I said, all right. I got one rod, and that's all I'm carrying. A guy steps in your boat to go fishing for the day, and he's got one rod.
Yeah, that's going to be a good day.
No tackle, no nothing.
Yeah, that's going to be a good day.
He asked, he said, hey, where's your tackle? I said, I got a bag of jigs in my pocket in a Ziploc bag. That's all I had. Because I knew he was going to go do it all day.
Yeah.
And I just asked a bazillion questions, and he continued to catch a 21-pound bag of smallmouth out of 30 foot of water, and I learned a lot.
Getting the jig all the way down to the bottom or hitting it suspended?
Just fishing 30 foot deep with an LBJ on docks was impressive. I learned a ton that day. Matter of fact, I took what I learned from that, fast forward not even 12 months, one of the first opens that I'd ever fished in my life, and I led the event for 2 days. Anyway, same scenario. We were at Norfolk doing the same thing in the fall, and I was fishing the same way that I'd learned from Akins with an LBJ. So it was a good weekend.
Were there a bunch of guys fishing it back then, or was it a I don't want to use the word cult, but was it like guarded? Because you have to remember.
You talking about the opens?
No, I'm talking about the LBJ. There's no live. Literally, probably the only website that's covered anything would have been Bass Zone.
Yeah.
There's no articles on it. Like, you're not sitting there. There's no one watching you catch all these fish. I mean, was that a deal that were a handful of guys that kept it quiet?
What was happening? No, it wasn't quiet because the Davis brothers, everybody up in Missouri that was catching fish, Wes Endicott, all the guys that were, they were all throwing it. So, no.
Yeah, but they had to have been telling people then because no one was watching them fish.
No, but just tournament guys at tournaments, they all knew. Yeah. And it was in, Pro-Am had a magazine. It was in there over and over and over and over and over and over.
I got you.
And then, it moved down to Grand and everybody was throwing it, and we threw it there for a long time and still throw it. I do not think it's the same bait that it once was.
Because of pressure?
Reason.
Because of the fish changing their diet, where they live? Why is it not?
I don't know, but it's not the same. It's not the same bait. I promise, it's not the same bait. It'd still catch them, it'd still win tournaments, but it's not what it once was. I don't know. But anyway,
you just not throw it enough.
Well, I took it and started having big success with it in other parts of the country where they had never seen it. Like that one that I lost by an ounce. Those were LBJ fish on Wheeler on a TVA system.
You don't think they'd ever seen that?
Dude, it was just like being at Grand in the old days. I mean, it was the big ones. That was the thing about it, was the size of the fish that ate it were the dang big ones. And so, I mean, the right time of year, you got all the stars aligned in the certain situations, and you pick that thing up, and it's just a matter of how big are they going to be, because they're going to be big.
You think you just don't throw it as much now? I mean, I've run with you a couple years now, and I don't ever remember.
Well, there's places that it doesn't play. I mean, there's places, any place that has grass in it, it for whatever reason, it doesn't work. It doesn't work up north very well. I'm sure there's times and windows that it may. But,
you mean in the grass? Like Wheeler has
well,
grass.
when you go north, you're thinking smallmouth, and I mean, it looks like a little crawfish. You'd think they'd eat it, but it's not the same. That net will kick its butt, you know.
Yeah.
It's just not what they want. There's just places that it doesn't work. And
but here's the thing, on Oneida and up north in Thousand Islands, guys catch the heck out of them on those compact little tungsten football jigs.
Yes,
they're brown. They're round rubber. They're dragging them on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's just different applications. It's hard to get it down there with what you do. And it's
a faster, you know, it's a heavier. The ones you're talking about are heavier. The ones I'm talking about they're light for a reason. I mean, it's because it's got that slow movement to it and slow fall rate in the springtime, early spring.
Clay brings up a good point. Last major tournament won on an LBJ would probably have been Edwin.
Yeah, on Grand Lake.
Yeah. And he wasn't even fishing it around rock.
No, but that's a commonly cult-known place.
I know that.
That's where the biggest bags of the lake come from.
Hypothetically.
In spring. Yeah.
Thinking about that.
Yeah.
I wanted to start the 2022 season off with some big guests. And one of the biggest guests that I thought I could get that was also a challenging interview would be Jordan Lee. Now, I've known Jordan since his days fishing at Auburn, the Lee brothers, Jordan and Matt Lee, when I ran a website called The College Bass Zone, actually did an episode of In the Dorms, which was basically a cribs for college anglers, and went and did their house that when they lived at Auburn. And the one thing about Jordan is, man, he has a tendency to kind of have the, shucks, I just go out and catch him and not really go in depth. But when you get him around other fishermen, he's very vocal. He talks a lot. He's very analytical when it comes to fishing, and he kind of hides that a little bit. I think you just see a guy with a lot of natural talent that has developed over thousands of hours on the water. So when I got Jordan on, I was like, man, I said, I really need you to bring it. It's the second solo show that I've done with BTL. And man, Jordan really stepped up to the plate. I was really appreciative of what he brought. He went through actually 5 or 6 lures that he'd won over $1 million on, kind of went through the course of his career. And one of the earliest memories that I have of Jordan Lee on the Bassmaster Elite Series was in the 2016 season. He had not won a classic yet. He had not won a major event outside of the college. He had become really close in the classic when he was in college, but it was the event, the Elite Series on Cayuga Lake. And I didn't know a lot of the backstory on that, of how that went down, and how Jordan, who was leading the tournament going into the final day, eventually fell to KVD. But just a really cool little backstory about that. And then I also thought it was unique of what kind of sticks out in Jordan Lee's mind about that tournament and about his interaction with KVD. So Jordan Lee on BTL in early January.
As far as the fishing went, like I remember, so that was our first trip to Cayuga, or my first trip. And my brother and I were kind of sharing info at the time. And I remember him in practice, we were talking. I'm like, man, I found some smallmouth on beds. And he's like, well, I got on this deal pitching a drop shot around on this north end. And I'm just kind of pitching holes and stuff. And he's like, I can't really see them though, because it's so cloudy and windy. And so I remember, going up to the north end, and I caught a couple. This was in practice. Caught a couple, nothing big, but it was super windy and cloudy, and you couldn't see anything. But I didn't even really put 2 and 2 together. First day of the tournament, I remember I caught, some big I say big. I caught 19 pounds, 20 pounds of smallmouth.
Strong.
And was like in, I don't know, 15th, 20th, something like that. Maybe 20th.
Yeah, that was a slugfest early on in that thing.
Yeah. And the next day I go out and I caught a couple smallmouth, just, a couple maybe 4-pounders, 3.5 pounders. And I didn't have anything else. I burned them up, and it was I remember it got glass calm and sunny, and I was like, I need to go. I got like 2 waypoints up here where I got bit. I remember Matt telling me, and he had a pretty decent first day, I think. And so I went up to where I got bit right on his waypoints, and I'm looking in the water, and it's gin clear, crystal clear, and seeing these holes, and I started whacking them. And it was like the light bulb went off, like, okay, they're either spawning in these holes, or I don't know what they're doing, but I don't know if they were spawning or just setting up in them. But anyways, caught like 22, 21 pounds, and then was in the lead, I think. And anyways, I led the third day. And then the final day, it was just that we had a big front, something changed. All the guys kind of struggled that last day. And just didn't catch enough to win. And I remember I was super disappointed because I thought, man, this is my shot to win first ever tournament. I'm on the fish, I know what to do. And Kevin ultimately caught basically one more fish that put him over the top. Had the fish on under a boat dock that it would have been close. It was a 3-something. I had 1.5 pounds. I lost 5 pounds. It could have won it. So and that was at the very end of the day too. So, when you got the fish on the last minute and it sitting on a cable or whatever, and it just come off, that's brutal. But yeah, after that tournament, maybe I got a little shot of confidence that, that's all it takes sometimes as a young angler. I didn't really probably have a whole lot of confidence as far as winning. I'm trying to make checks and trying to stay in it. Just trying to find my way, really.
What's amazing is that in the entire time that you fished the Elite Series from 15 to 2018, you only had 9 finishes below 50th place. And you're talking about a field of over 100 anglers there. So that's right around just 2 finishes below 50th a year. So that's insane consistency. But my question is, like, what did Kevin say to you after that? Because you're 24 years old. You'd probably done some stuff with the Toyota and the team and dynamic stuff with him. Like, What is the one-on-one? Like, obviously you have it behind stage where all the media and stuff is. But was there like a moment between just you two after that Cayuga event? Do you remember?
I don't remember after that. All I remember after that was, I think he may still be sponsored by Busch Light. And I remember him on stage just like spewing the beer. And
Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
Yeah. And that's all I remember is like, losing to Kevin and having the Busch Light getting sprayed everywhere. And I'm like, God, this sucks.
Well, we closed out the first week of BTLs with a guest that I wasn't sure how this was going to go. Jason Christie. Now, we have a history. We've done the one-on-one against each other a couple years ago. And then Jason found out that I'd gone and practiced for this one-on-one that we filmed during the pandemic, during COVID, when nothing was really going on in 2020. And he kind of had a bone to pick about me. So I was kind of offering him a potential for a rematch. I know he's been big with the crappie. He talked about the YouTube channel that he was starting. I said, hey, here's a great opportunity here. But probably had me squirming in my seat a little bit. But a lot of feedback, a lot of comments about this, and in all actuality, Jason, great dude, great representative of the sport, and incredibly talented. Very looking forward to see what he does in the upcoming months, especially returning to the classic on Lake Hartwell. But Jason kind of gave it to me a little bit. He did not let me off the hook easy when it came to when it came to his thoughts about fishing one-on-one with him and possibility about getting a rematch. And I know you kind of fancy yourself a crappie angler. I've seen the posts, and it's pretty impressive. You're really good at putting a little jig on them in deep water and catching them.
Yeah, well, there's two things that I enjoy about that. One is it's supper. I mean, I'm having crappie tonight. And two, honestly, is it's practice it's live scope practice, for the rest of the year. I get out there, and that's how I gain confidence. If I can see a crappie jig 75 feet and watch a crappie eat it, I know that if I drop a spoon or a spinnerbait or something like that on a bass, I'm for sure going to see that.
Yeah.
So, it's really practicing for bass, but yeah, I enjoy doing it.
Are you down for a one-on-one best 7 crappie derby?
My question to you is, how many days are you going to practice for this?
You can't keep bringing that up. I will practice. So we have to establish there were no rules beforehand.
No, there were.
I'm just saying.
There was. It
was a gray area.
Yeah, there was a gray area, and how many days you gonna practice? Is my question.
If I was fishing, if you were in my shoes and it was a gray area, would you not have been out there practicing for a couple hours? Just be honest. If you were in my shoes.
No, because I want to put my head on the pillow that night and go to sleep. I don't want to have a guilty conscience. So you still have a guilty conscience because you're denying it.
But I didn't make you pay. I'm not denying it.
No,
there was nothing that said we couldn't practice. I went out for 3 hours the day before.
It's not about the money. It's the fact that you have a video out there that's got 500,000 views, and I'm the brunt of the joke on that deal.
No, there's not. That's not a joke at all, dude.
It's a joke to me.
See, I'm still intimidated because I almost just offered to take it down. And then I was like, grow a pair, keep it up there. Like, yeah. But here's the crazy thing. On that video last year, I did not catch a single fish in the same area or doing what I did the day before that I had practiced. I caught them completely opposite of how I thought I would. So
Don't defend yourself. Let's move on, because it ain't going to do any better. I mean, you.
Would you like a day of crappie practice beforehand?
No, I don't
Can we
practice? Where are we going to do this at?
That's the thing. That's the problem here, because the crappie fishing, because like I have my spots and you have your spots, right? So I know you're probably running through your head like 4 or 5 different places that you think you could put a hurting on 1.5 to 2 pound crappie, and I am as well. Mm-hmm. So off air, and I know you're super busy in this. It's just like an afternoon deal. We might even be able to have 2 people for a boat if you want to bring someone tonight. Not John or Zeke. Those people. That's a no-go on John or Zeke. That's an unfair advantage, unless it's John and Zeke, and then I get John or Zeke and vice versa. Then that's the only way that works. Okay. But we'll see if we have any fisheries in common that we both think we can catch them, because I feel like I fish for crappie differently than you fish for crappie.
I like to catch them out of like 50 foot suspended. That's my favorite way to catch them.
Yeah, so we fish for crappie very differently. Because
Mm-hmm.
most of my crappie this time of year will be 7 to 10 foot,
yeah.
Possibly 6 or shallower. But I think that would be fun. I've never actually done the 7-fish crappie tournament.
Yeah.
Are you agreeing
I don't care.
to that?
I mean, it's
Zero practice, no practice. We'll just try to find a fishery that's both in common that we both think we can catch them on.
Sounds good.
All right. Man, you end the interview and make me feel like I did something wrong.
And we post that on my channel.
Yeah, yours. No, that was what I was going to say. 100%. We'll post it on your channel. One of my favorite professional anglers to hang out with, and for a lot of people, I mean, the guy is just a really likable guy, and that would be Fred Rambanis. You know, he's originally from California. He moved to Oklahoma roughly around the time that I started covering bass fishing and the Bassmaster Elite Series, and we kind of teamed up. We have kind of the same kind of scatterbrained personality where we're real detail oriented in other things and just kind of chaos and others. Neither of us have a sense of direction at all. But I know, and I've talked to Fred about how he got into swim bait fishing early on in his teenage years. Not in a boat, he was riding a bike. He talks about it in this clip, and on how in California, him and his buddies, when they were 13, 14 years old, really figured out this trout bite on their own. Remember, no YouTube, no internet, just kind of magazines was the only thing. And he tells a really cool story to kick off the second week in January of BTLs about how he uses that old Abergast and the AC plug and these big wooden jointed baits to really kind of figure out fish behavior, following the trout trucks around in California. Some cool elements in here. I'd kind of known the basics of it, but did not know just how cool it was and how innovative it was of what these kids were doing in California. And here Fred kind of reminisces about it. So what years? What? Mid 90s, mid 90s,
1993.
Okay, who else was
Early
throwing
90s,
these big
yeah.
things? Like were there tournament guys? What, or was
No,
this something that
is
everyone was
before I
like, "What
even-
are these kids doing?"
Dude, this is before I even, like, other than watching, Bassmasters on TNN back then, I didn't even know there were local tournaments back then. That's how long ago this was. I didn't even know we had tournament. I didn't even know about the California Delta. That's how long ago we were throwing these things.
So what? You had a
And,
buddy
then we
who
started-
was like, how
We
did
got
this
it at
all come
Kmart.
about?
He bought it at, well, because we would trout fish and we'd bass fish and we'd watch them stock the trout and we'd watch these big bass. You catch a trout on a Castmaster and big bass would try to take them off. And we're like, dude, we need to figure something out. How are we going to catch these fish? And Ted went to Kmart with his mom and saw this thing for like $17. And back then that was like, dude, at Kmart, like, I can't afford one of those. My mom's not going to buy me one of these baits. Man, we had to chop wood to get our parents to buy us, an AC plug. But yeah, that's what we did. We bought them at Kmart and we took him down there and really he experimented with it first. So I'm giving him all the credit on it. And it was awesome. He was catching all these big fish. We kept it a secret. There was another buddy of ours, Phil, and but it's Jason and Bo, and there was really just a small little circle of friends that were buying these baits and throwing them until the ranger station thought we were throwing live trout or something, because they said, man, those look too much real. We don't want you throwing those anymore. And we're like, and then the cast stakes, came out and they had more of a soft body that looked real. And I mean, then those baits really started looking, I mean, look at what we got today. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
But really it's just, it's kind of the start of something big.
And you kind of had that. I mean, who knows what else other guys are because there was no YouTube, there was none of this stuff to where
there was no
now.
internet.
I mean, if this is going on, you've got a dude with a chesty and a hat cam who does it. They make one video and it's boom, it's absolutely exploded. But I mean, you were able to keep it a secret back then.
Yeah, and then I remember the first year, the Ever Start series, which FLW came out west, the very first year, I was living in Southern California, and I'd caught, I'd taken it on my boat, and stuff that I had after fishing some tournaments, and I'd catch some fish here and there in tournaments. Well, it was just a confidence thing for me. It was just like me throwing a frog, but it was just a bait that I caught. I knew I can catch big fish just about anywhere. I'd catch them on Lake Irvine, Southern California. Well, we came back to the California Delta, and I caught the majority of my fish ripping that on the surface. And shortly after, and it made a top 10. Had, I caught a 5 and a 6 in one cast on that thing in that tournament. It was pretty awesome. But I mean, it was cool. And then you started seeing these MS Slammers coming out. You started seeing all these other, real cool, awesome baits coming out. And Optimum Baits had an Optimum Minnow. I should have brought that too. That was a great bait. Good waking bait. It's got a bill on it. And then Alan Cole, I think at one point went from Fred Arbogast to, because they had an OB Minnow, which was the AC version too, which I've got some of those too under Optimum. And at the same time, I was throwing these Optimum soft baits from the bank as well. So, that's kind of what Optimum Baits has been my longest running sponsor. And, it's kind of cool to say that because I've got my own swim bait nowadays from it.
We got into a little bit more of an educational show for the 5th regular BTL of the season, and this was with Matt Looney of Pro Guide Batteries. Pro Guide came on as a sponsor of BTL, and one of the things that I want to do this year is utilize the contacts that we have in the industry, both sponsors of the show and non-sponsors of the show, to kind of take their expertise and things that I think a lot of people think they should know about, or a lot of people who are in the tournament fishing scene. You hear a lot of things about, numbers and actions and rigging that you just take for granted. And I'm sitting here and I've been doing this full time now, and I'm fishing the opens, and I'm like, man, there's some basic stuff that I don't feel like I'm up to snuff on it. And battery care, battery maintenance was one of those things. Hey, as long as it turned on, as long as it started, I was good to go on it. So I wanted to get Matt Looney on. I kind of served as a guinea pig there, ask a bunch of what I would consider quote unquote dumb questions about batteries, but wasn't sure how this show was going to go, because it's a battery, man. It's just a box. It sits there. It's hard to get excited about. But Matt, very knowledgeable with Pro Guide Batteries, also fishes the MPFL and the Bassmaster Opens. But he really brought it. Got a lot of great feedback from the listeners, from the viewers, about just how much they learned about basics in batteries, from the AGMs to the lead acids to the lithiums to the rigging to different configurations, what works together, what not. But here's just a little sample of some of the knowledge that Matt Looney dropped during his appearance on BTL in January.
So you can technically overcharge it if you don't have the proper charger. But so our chargers nowadays, the smart chargers, the Minn Kota PCs, the PowerPole chargers, or whatever you want to put on there, you can leave those things plugged in 24/7, and I would suggest to leave them plugged in. So they're not going to overcharge your battery. They're going to keep that thing charged up to where it needs to be. Now, the one thing I will say, you charge it up the night before, you're going fishing and you charge it up and everything shows green. You can unplug it and plug it back in, and they may get just a tiny bit more charge right on the surface. So there's some people that'll talk about that a lot, and that there is some truth to that. By plugging in a second time, you get just basically top it off right at the tip top. But in general, I've got guys I deal with up in the Northeast right now, and I'm like, man, either leave them plugged in or take them out of your boat and put them somewhere warm. That's kind of the thing right now, because leaving them plugged in is not going to hurt them at all, and it'll, in all reality, it'll keep it going. But like I said, the reason you hear things like that, the older chargers didn't automatically turn off, and they weren't as smart as they are now, and so you could overcharge a battery, and it would swell. It would, so that's the thing that I see the most often when talking to people about either battery myths or different things like that. Is it was true at one point, but it's no longer true.
So if you have a quote unquote state of the art onboard charger, one of those, like you mentioned, the Minn Kota or the PowerPole charge, it's kind of a plug it in and you're good. Right. But if you're in an older boat to where you're actually putting putting it on the positive and the negative and the clamps and doing all of that, now you're kind of at it. You have to pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah, you'd want to pay attention. And here's the deal. If you've got a charger like that, if you don't have an onboard charger, I'm not saying you have to leave your batteries plugged in 24/7. I'm saying it's simple with the onboard. But I would charge your batteries up at least once every few months. Even like if you're in the off season, or even if it's summer, or I don't care what the weather is, if you're not using it, it needs to be charged probably every 3 months.
Well, we wrapped up the second full week of BTL with a guest that I've been wanting to get on for a long time. I kind of met this guy at the Bassmaster Classic. I've had some interactions with him on social media, and that is Ben Milliken. Ben is a tournament angler, but mainly known for Milliken fishing and a large following that he has had on YouTube. But just in my kind of brief interactions with him, I kind of noticed this guy has a real good understanding of both the tournament side of it and the marketing and the YouTube side of it. And recently he's been kicking out just some monster fish. I think he caught 8 double-digit fish in 2021. So I wanted to get Ben on to kind of merge those worlds of the YouTube, the social media, and the serious tournament fishermen. I was unaware that he had aspirations to become a professional angler at some point, and I also thought it was interesting with as popular and as many millions of views and followers, he does this full-time, producing content for social media, that there weren't more high-end elite level pro anglers who are trying to get into the YouTube game who hadn't reached out to him for information. It's a really interesting show to go back to listen to that, because I would have thought, man, let's get with this guy, and it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'll get you into the social media game. You can kind of work with me on some of the professional angling aspects. But he dropped this on me, and I was not expecting this at all. And Ben just kind of nonchalantly mentioned the giant world record size fish that he believes swim. He knows they swim. He was in the boat when a 16-pounder was caught, and like I said, caught multiple over 10. But we're talking like other stratosphere stuff, like 18 to 20s potential world records. And you could tell I'm like genuinely surprised during this section of the interview. And dude, he's like really matter of fact about some of the size of the fish that he believes he's seen using forward-facing sonar. But really an eye-opening interview to close out the first 2 weeks of BTL with Ben Milliken. Really appreciate he's actually in a hotel room waiting to go fishing and stay back to do that interview with BTL to close out that second week.
I think one thing people don't understand was I've always, especially the last few years before I moved, posted content catching 5 and 6 pounders in Nebraska pretty much every time I went out. And a lot of times I'd catch a dozen of them. And people watch the videos and those are great fish. Those are bigger than what I usually catch, but they don't realize those are the biggest fish in the lake. Those are our biggest fish. Those are our Texas 8 to 10 pound fish. And so moving down here, it's parallel. I mean, I'm able to target fish in the same way. I have learned a lot the last year about specifically targeting this big fish that I think has helped me, and hopefully we'll go stick some big ones today and moving forward. But yeah.
You mentioned in your last video there was a deal where you said, oh, is it a state record? And then you were kind of joking about that. Do you think there's an actual possibility that, I believe the state record in Texas is 18 pounds? Do you think there's a real possibility that a state record over the next couple years could get caught on camera in Texas?
Yeah, I'm going to. No, I would. They're out there. 1,000% chance. I've seen them on live scope. I know there are a couple different lakes that have them for sure.
Really?
Positive.
What do you think the biggest one you've seen on live scope is?
I don't know. It's hard to tell between a 15 and a low 20s.
You think you've seen a 20-pound bass on live scope?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes. And if you've
Just
seen a
based on
20,
how it behaves,
there's probably a world
how it
record, right?
looks. Yeah.
Yeah, like a beach ball swimming around slowly.
How many 18 to 20-pound bass do you think you've had a bait over the last 2 years within 10 feet of?
A handful, probably.
You realize what you're saying here. This is like nuts, dude.
Yeah, people don't understand it. That's why it's really cool. Hopefully we catch one of them.
Yeah. It seems
I didn't think it was possible either until I got live scope and started exploring some of these lakes that used to be untapped.
So the big bass craze that started in California, where you do like Castaic and all this, and then you Dixon and all that, and you look them up on Google Earth and you realize these aren't guys that are just like going out, and it's a unique set of circumstances between the trout and the fishery, and they're small and they're not super highly pressured right now. Is that kind of happening in Texas right now between the technology, the baits, the perfect storm that is setting up, in your opinion? And there's going to be a small window where obviously we've seen a lot of these records and giants and 14, 12, 14, 15-pound fish. Do you think we're in a window right now based on what you've seen?
I don't think we're in a window. I think it's opened up. I mean, you could call it a window, but I don't see it ending anytime soon. But it's a combination of the technology and then I don't know. But the Texas Parks and Wildlife, the concerted effort with the ShareLunker program to stock hundreds of thousands of these ShareLunker fry in these lakes 10 to 15 years ago, Yeah, and then a low population around some of these lakes and areas that have these lakes, mixed with great habitat, great water quality, and a crazy forage base.
How many of these guys are doing this?
As
Like
far
targeting
as
targeting these types of fish on the right bodies of water.
I don't know. I know at least 2 or 3.
But it's not like hundreds.
Well, it is
that
now.
Are doing it in your opinion. That's the thing. Like, how do you do this without just like destroying fisheries?
Well, we're 0 for 1 on that. But we didn't do that on purpose. That actually only happened because we went to release our 16-pounder and we weren't going to put any of it on. And we didn't ever say the name of the lake we caught it at.
Mm-hmm.
But it only happened because it wouldn't swim off, it wouldn't kick off. So we ended up taking it to the Cheryl Anchor facility. And at that point, it got registered and people saw where it was at. And then you got a zoo down there now.
Because they post what lake it's on, like the 2 14-pounders that just got caught. It
Correct.
was on Texas Parks and Wildlife with, hey, here's the lake and these guys holding the fish.
Correct. Yeah, those fish almost didn't happen.
Well, we are halfway through the January 2022 recap show, highlighting some of the best of BTL in the month of January. We're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be back with the second half of the month, kicking things off with a really interesting appearance and a big announcement from Mike McClellan.
The Ultimate Fishing System by Lowrance. Your choice of powerful fish-finding tools, all connected. From sonar and trolling motor to navigation and networking. To fit the way you fish. All with touchscreen control from HDS Live, the heart of your system. Find more, see more, catch more with the Ultimate Fishing System by Lowrance. Upgrade to the Ultimate Fishing System and get up to $1,000 cash back.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
I've been living on the water for over 20 years.
For 14 years.
For over 23 years.
I've worn a bunch of different clothing brands over the years. Some companies big.
And some companies small.
All of them said they were making clothing for us. But none of them knew us.
None of them were us. Except for one.
Except for one.
Except one.
AFCO.
AFCO.
AFCO. AFCO. Fishing isn't part of us. It is us.
The KVD 100 jerkbait. 15 different colors. A perfect combination of roll, wiggle, and flash. Increased castability. 3D eyes. Premium black nickel hooks. KVD. Tie one on. Striking lures.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
So, you're looking to buy fishing electronics, huh? Are you also looking for true experts to help guide you through it? Well, at the Bass Tank, you've come to the right place. We are live forward-facing sonar pioneers with thousands of hours spent learning through winning trophies, cashing checks, and just having fun. Whatever brand you need, we have it. We offer free shipping, and we have 2 financing options available. Our experts are here to help you. Call us today or visit thebasstank.com.
Hey guys, Major League Fishing Pro Jacob Wheeler here with my new Signature Series line of rods with Duck It Fishing. We have my 7.2 cranking rod right here. Crankbaits can be very fickle, and having the right, having a lot of tip can be too much, and having not enough tip can, lose a lot of fish. So you really got to be careful. If there's 1 or 2 techniques that I'm really adamant about having the perfect action as a crankbait, especially like a square bill, a DT6, those medium running crankbaits in the springtime when those fish's mouth are pretty tough. That's when I'm really on top of having my actions just perfect.
One of the cool new jig heads that Big Bite came out with is the ram head, named after the golden ram cliff perch, and it's really designed specifically for the Ned style. But one of the cool things about this jig head and the Gamakatsu hook that Big Bite put in it, especially in the 3/16 ounce model, is how versatile it is. You can actually rig it 4 or 5 different ways instead of having to go through a myriad of different jig heads. This will get the job done. A bunch of different jig heads. You can actually very efficiently get the job done with the new ram head.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
Combining one of the most popular hook styles with Gamakatsu's beefier Superline offering, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend delivers the strength necessary to target big fish in heavy cover. Well suited for braided line and heavier fluorocarbon, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend is built using stronger Superline wire that allows anglers to easily fish a finesse worm around heavy cover. The round bend offers a larger bite area, perfect for any worm presentation, while increasing your hookup ratios. The newly enhanced Z-bend holds your plastics on the hook longer, reducing the number of pull-offs and reducing damage to plastics. Available in 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0, this is the most durable worm hook, designed for heavier lines that hold your bait on longer.
Preparation is key to success. And that preparation starts well before you ever hit the water. You're only as strong as your connection to the fish, and your line is that critical connection. Confidence in your line every minute of every day on the water is a necessity, and failure, it's not an option. Sunline makes the fluorocarbon, nylon, and braided lines to give you the strength to guarantee your confidence.
Welcome back to BTL, closing things out in January with the Bass Talk Live recap show for the month of January. And we kicked off the 3rd week of January with a guest appearance by a BTL favorite, big-time BTL supporter over the years, and a guy that I really look up to, has taught me a lot, always taken time and gone out of his way to call me, to actually be a good friend. Same with Mark. Guy's been around forever, big-time poker player, and that's Mike McClellan. But Mike announced his new partnership with Andy's Frozen Custard, and kind of in the first part of the interview, we talked about how that relationship came about, how he's always been a little bit on the forefront of unique non-endemic sponsorships and making the most of those partnerships. But we actually got into some technique stuff, and if you know Mike, you know he is probably one of the best to ever pick up a rod and reel in the Ozarks. He's synonymous with Table Rock Lake, and he talked a little bit about the difference between a shad year and a crawfish year, and whether those fish would be eating a mixed stick or a rock crawler. And he went a little bit into the process of how he designed that rock crawler all those years ago. But it clicked in my head where there is a little bit of a circle of life thing, and it was something that I had never thought about, but to Mike, it made perfect sense. It made just common sense that, hey, if this happens at this time of year with the water, then they'll be eating a rock crawler in this part of the lake, or crankbait or crawfish related early on. And if this happens and this happens, then there'll be more suspended related to shad. So very educational section of the overall interview with Mike McClellan.
You know, the unique thing about Table Rock and some of these Ozark lakes is, you know, you'll have one year that the stick bait bite is off the charts, you know, and the wiggle wart bite wasn't so good. And then the next year, it's like the stick bait bite's just so, but the wiggle wart bite was unbelievable. And I really think that's kind of what happened when I developed the McStick series. And I think that would have been in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, somewhere along in there is when we really got serious about the McSticks. But somewhere in that later range of the 2000s, you know, 2010, 2012, I'm like, guys, can I do a bait, you know, that's similar to a wiggle wart? And we actually developed, if I'm not mistaken, the first prototype of a rock crawler was done in 2013, I believe.
So,
and these are some of the earlier versions that I've got here in my hand. And as you look at them, you can actually see that I'm having trouble finding my camera.
Yes,
some of the bills
this is a new feature that we can do here.
And
boom, look at that. There you go.
So some of the bills were actually smaller. The body shapes were a little bit different. If you can look at these two baits, you can actually see that the bill on the one in this hand is smaller than the other.
But that's that's the same bait though. These are like 2013 models. Hold those up on the side too.
Yeah,
so those were like 13, 14 models of the higher.
Exactly. Now some of these, you know, got painted with special paint jobs to try to catch fish on them. Basically, was what we were trying to do. The actions were so, but I actually played with the bait from, you know, like 13 up until the year that we came here for the Bassmaster Elite Series. And I hate to say it, but it was either 14 or 15. I can't remember.
The one you won was 14.
Yeah, the one I won, 15?
14.
14. Okay. So that year was just one of those years that the crankbait bite was better than the jerkbait bite. Now, I caught fish on a jerkbait. Go ahead.
Is that because, like, something happened with the ground and like the crawfish were super active and we're having a great time in the fall, and all of a sudden there's more crawfish, and then other years like they're just not as active, they're not going to the club as much, and the shad are like partying, and then boom, there's tons of shad? I mean, seriously, like, are there more crawfish when they're biting a rock crawler?
Yes, and a big part of that is generally if you have a shad kill on this lake early in the spring, the dead shad float to the bottom or sink to the bottom, and the crawfish come out from the rocks to eat them. The fish eventually get tired of eating dying shad. And when those crawfish come out and start eating dead shad, that's when they really start eating a
so it's
rock
a
crawler.
combo deal. It's not just really like one thing. It's like you have to have the shad, and then the shad die, and then they gorge on the shad, and then there's fewer shad, but then the shad provides nutrients to the crawfish, and then the crawfish boom, and then there's more crawfish. So this whole thing starts with a crazy cold snap, and that leads to whether it's a shad year or a crawfish year on the Ozark Lakes in a roundabout way.
That is pretty much what dictates what happens on these lakes every year. It really is.
That is. How many people that fish Ozark Lakes do you think understand that little circle of life? I wish I had the Lion King circle of life music here.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, that's very basic, but it's very advanced at the same time.
Yeah, it's something you really got to pay attention to. And even certain sections of the lake will develop differently than other sections, depending on how many shad die, how warm the water is, how cold the water is. There's a lot of things that have to be thought through.
Jimmy Washum is an angler who he's an enigma. He came onto the scene. He's never stunk. He's always caught fish. And we had him on following the 2019 season when he qualified for at the time it was the FLW Tour, which then was purchased by MLF, became the MLF Pro Circuit, and now Jimmy Washum who's in law enforcement, a younger dude just looking to break into the industry. He's like, hey, I've had a great run in the Toyota Series or the Costa Series when he qualified for the Pro Circuit. Now I'm going to make a run at it. We had him on the show, and I remember after the show in 2019 where he talked about how he was going all in. He was fishing he was fishing a couple divisions of the Toyota Series. I was like, man, this guy, Mark and I both agreed, this guy did a really great job on the interview. I think he's going to be really solid. I think he's going to catch him. And then he went out and won a Toyota Series, almost won a tour event, won the MLF title in 2021, did some astronomical, I can't remember what the number was. I want to say like $400,000 or $500,000 in earnings in the last 2 years. And I was like, man, we got to get this guy back on. So before the season started, on Sam Rayburn for 2022, Jimmy Washum came back on, and this was another gem, kind of like McClellan, when my ears kind of perked up, and Jimmy started talking about dealing with adrenaline, anxiety, excitement, and that's something that we all deal with in tournament bass fishing. You know, that kind of buzzing Uncle Frank talks about, when you're buzzing, that feeling, and how that affects your decision making, and how there are certain things that you can do to control, to maintain, to manage that adrenaline, and instead of letting it consume you and lead to bad decisions, aka spinning out, actually harness it and use it as an advantage. And Jimmy here talked about how his background in law enforcement has really kind of taught him how to do that. And even though it's not a life-threatening situation in the tournament on the water when you're excited after blast off, it's still kind of the same methods to ensure maximum success on the water.
You know, it was a feeling that I've never felt in fishing. I had a bellyache and I had butterflies and excitement at the same time, because $30,000 meant a lot. But I also realized, man, if we wouldn't have had a day canceled and I was on the fish so well, I don't know that Laramie was as consistent as I was. And a lot of people, you know, I'd listen to podcasts and stuff after that. A lot of people would say, yeah, if we wouldn't have lost today to the weather, Washum would have won that one. And it kind of, you know, gnawed at me a little bit, but with a little bit of time behind it, I realized, like, I don't need to win my second professional event. So this is a good thing. So it didn't take long, you know, for that bellyache to go away.
Do you think that being in law enforcement and having to make really like quick decisions, put things in perspective, deal with stress, pressure all the time, really allowed you to adapt to high pressure situations and fishing easier than those of us who don't really experience that kind of chest, stomach, heart flutter feeling all the time?
Absolutely. Not just law enforcement, but the role that I played in law enforcement. I was a firearms instructor and chemical weapons, and a lot of what I did, and especially when I became an instructor and that stuff, is taught people how to deal with adrenaline. And adrenaline will I mean, it can absolutely ruin you. It diminishes your fine motor skills, you know, dexterity and things you do with your fingers. And for me to learn how to deal with that and breathe through it and put it out of my mind and still focus and not get tunnel vision, it basically makes it much easier for me not to spin out. I can't imagine some of the stress that we're put under in professional fishing with how much money you have on the line. If I didn't have the ability to put that out, you know, and to cope with it, it would be harder. Like, I can promise you that.
Have you taken actually like professional courses on managing stress and adrenaline? Like, is that you're trained in that, and then you train other people in managing that? Was that part of your?
It's not necessarily like particularly not like a week-long class of how to deal with stress, but we're taught, you know, what it does to the body, how you deal with it. And then for 9 years, I trained on how to put that stress aside and handle the situation accordingly. And, now it's just second nature. The stress is different, you know, stress involving, possible, injury or death is much different.
A little different than fishing.
Yeah, much different than a little bit of money on the table, but it still does the same thing to your body. So it definitely plays a role in me being able to cope with stressful situations.
Yeah, like I said, we got to make this very clear what the difference between the law enforcement and that. But I can't tell you. I used to. I wouldn't say struggle with it, but notice it. And I know, I talked to my buddy who fished the Open on Grand, and I said, "Well, what'd you think?" It was his first Open, and he is as cool as a cucumber. And he's like, "Man, I got to my first spot, and I just was like, just smoking the docks with my jig because." My hands were kind of numb, and I had that, and my co-anglers, will talk about, I'm so what are some of your tips for that guy, even if it's just a club tournament, maybe it's your first BFL, your first Toyota series, your first Open, from the front or back of the boat, when you feel that adrenaline, like what would be some of your tips to guys to kind of get it under control, get your wits about you, and perform at the best you can on the water, managing those emotions and feelings that at the time are like, you're not like, oh, let's get all shaky and excited. It just happens.
Yeah, it just happens. That there's probably there's no way to rule out the experience curve. Get 2 or 3 of them behind you, and it gets easier. Just like when I was a rookie at Police Academy, I was just a ball of stress and a nervous wreck, so you can't defeat that curve of experience. But one thing that I did, and I still do it if I need to, in stressful situations. But what I would always do if I was in a high-speed vehicle pursuit, that was the most nervous that you get, because you're in an enclosed little box, and it's like the whole world around you is just unraveling. You're driving way too fast after somebody that's done something really bad. But I would do what they call combat breathing, and breathe in for 4 seconds, fill my lungs up, hold it for 4 seconds. And that's in through the nose, hold it 4 seconds, breathe out through the mouth 4 seconds. And you do that for about 3 or 4 cycles, and you can literally feel your heart rate come down. You get oxygen to the brain. You're able to look at the world around you instead of down that little tunnel that you're looking at. So, and that works for fishing too. That works for anything where you get nervous, shaky, feel the adrenaline rolling. Do that combat breathing for 3 or 4 cycles, and it'll help.
That's good stuff, Jimmy.
Yeah, I can't wait to go to the next Toyota Series event and count how many people are over there.
Hyperventilating. Closed out the third week of BTL in January with a guy that I really like. Have not had him on BTL as much as we should have, and that's Hunter Shryock. Hunter is a grinder, man. He put his years in the Opens, developed a brand, a reputation, paired with great companies. So when he did finally qualify for the Bassmaster Elite Series, he had a lot of sponsor backing. He had a lot of momentum going into it. Even though he doesn't have the wins, Hunter's been incredibly consistent, qualified for 3 Bassmaster Classics over the course of his career, including this one coming up on Lake Hartwell. And one of the kind of marketing or media things that Hunter has done is he created an alter ego called Larry. And I wasn't sure how this actually started, and it just kind of came out. They said, hey, we need to bring this guy back. So this is a story that Hunter told of how Larry came to be. I would be remiss if I did not mention the throng of listeners that are begging you to bring back Larry the Legend.
Oh, man. I know. He's kind of slipped through the cracks lately. He's been laying low.
Is he still around though? He's still
around. He's still around. So like we moved. Yeah, I don't think Larry moved with us. He stayed in Ohio. I'll have to get him down here.
Larry's had some boat trouble. He's been in the shop. The supply chain kind of got to him. But is there a chance that he might he might get his act together in 2022?
He almost came out at the Classic last year. I feel like Larry should weigh in at the Classic.
How'd you come up with that? Do you remember the very first time you put that wig on?
Yeah, it was Halloween, like back in like 14 or 15 or something. So I was literally driving to Lake Erie to go bass fishing. It was Halloween. I stopped in at a Walmart, and this was all just for a social media post. I bought that stupid wig, and then I started talking like that. I don't even know why I started talking like that. Everything like kind of like reverse engineered itself. but
it just happened.
It just happened. Like I was sitting there and I was fishing at a place where it was like stupid easy to catch fish. And so there I am dressed as an idiot catching fish. Then I start talking like I don't know, Larry the Legend. That's where he was born. And then that video was made, and it was like all downhill from there. Alter egos.
All right, but he's not. He's still around eventually.
Yeah, he's
He
a
might make
TikTok.
it.
He's a TikTok superstar.
I've never been on TikTok in my life. I wouldn't even know how to open up TikTok.
That's where he lives. He needs to live on TikTok.
Is there a bunch of stuff that just gets recycled from Larry the Legend?
I
on TikTok?
recycled up because you got to think none of these kids have ever seen Larry the Legend.
Oh yeah, it's fair.
And so I took a lot of those clips and I put them on TikTok, and they blew up. So that's on my TikTok page. But
Am I really missing it? Am I really missing out by not being on TikTok?
No. I mean, unless you just want viewers. I mean, I don't. It's not like I get on there and scroll. I can't scroll.
All right. Those of you that have listened to BTL over the years, you know one of the best in-studio guests that we have had is John Sokup. John won 2 of the NPFLs this year. He also top 10 to Bassmaster Open. Been really well known around Oklahoma for probably the past decade. Really just kind of took his talents to the national scene over the past 2 or 3 years. And then he also started the Bass Tank, which is one of the country's kind of foremost authorities on electronics and rigging and installation. People from all over the country come to get their electronics installed and rigged at the Bass Tank, and that thing is growing. The dude's a workaholic. He works constant. He's always doing something fishing related, business related, growing the brand, always has new ideas. And I think people forget that he has like a crazy good mind when it comes to understanding this forward-facing sonar and the technology and the role that electronics play in the current landscape of both recreational fishing, kind of minor league fishing, and professional fishing. And the thing that amazes me about John is with all this stuff that he has on his plate, he still finds so much time to spend on the water to get better with his electronics, to get better with understanding it. And this clip I thought is kind of just a synopsis of what is like, just a little bit of glimpse into John's mind as far as understanding the fishery, using your electronics to know what is going on way beyond just see fish, cast a fish, catch fish. This is a really cool example from John's 2-hour in-studio interview when he joined me at BTL of just how deep his understanding is of the entire process that leads to success.
Most of the time, everything in fishing, I call it the 90% rule. 90% of these rules are true, and then there's the 10% time that they make you look like a fool. But most of the time on a good crappie bite is not as good of a bass day, and a lot of times a good bass fishing day is not as good of a crappie day. And when you get out there and you see crappie roaming everywhere, there's a reason why a little 10-inch crappie feels comfortable, because he doesn't think he's getting 8. Okay, do you understand the concept of that? But on the days that you get out there and the predators are out, you got the stripers out, you got the bass out, the crappie are hunched tighter to the cover. So you can learn real quick as you study. I mean, if a few minutes of me putting the trolling motor in the water, I can pretty much tell you what the fish's personality, and I mean the whole lake's personality is for that day. And that really quickly gives me something to go tune in on. So you show up, do you want to know if you want to throw a moving bait or a bottom bait, for instance, and you don't have, you got to break down a lake, you put that trolling motor in and look at that fish behavior, and if there's no bait anywhere and it's all hunkered tight, it's time to possibly get tight to the cover. You know what I mean? So that way, within 2 or 3 minutes first thing I usually do when I drop the boat in the water, I'm playing with my electronics, and I'll drop the live scope in and stuff, and I'll look around, and it gives me an idea right away of, can I come do what I really want to do, or do I have to change already? That's what you mean by personality based, like the person. Explain personality of the lake a little bit deeper, because that's kind of hard to wrap my mind around. So I think as people, we try to pattern fish just by the season that they're in or week by week. And that's where you get that, oh, you should have been here last week, right? Like you go to the crappie dock and you're talking to the guy and they're like, oh man, you should have been here yesterday. They were smashing. What were they smashing? Oh, they were on a pink and yellow too. Like, so now we're all, so we're trying to do, but the truth is the more you understand and follow the fish through electronics, fish change hour by hour, man. Their personalities change hour by hour. And that is how getting in tune to that is what keeps you catching fish all the time. And what I mean by that is, dude, like 1 minute, they're just like humans in a way. We're happy 1 minute, we're sad the next minute we're grumpy at something, and then we're laughing again. Now all of a sudden we're really hungry. Like fish go through those same cycles throughout the day. Not necessarily maybe as much on the emotional side of things, but they are.
I was targeting really emotional fish.
It seems that way sometimes, man. Like so they don't necessarily, you know, we talk in terms of they're on this spot or they're on that spot or on that spot because we're interpreting how many we caught. But that's not always true. There's times where you can throw at 100 fish school and not get bit. They're still there. They're just in a negative mood. And what triggers that mood from being into a positive mood of actually biting? Well, it can be an environmental factor. What if the bait fish are super high pressured and so the bait fish themselves are sunk down, or there's on the wintertime it's a really cloudy day, they're sunk down because they're just not comfortable because they know they've pushed to more vertical structure because they're trying to protect themselves and stay warm and ball up. Well, the fish now all of a sudden a little bit of things change, maybe some wind blows or something of that nature, and then the bait come up and they start moving. Well, a big ball of gizzard shad going across a 100 bass school, it's going to fire them up. And once they get now, all of a sudden, and that window, when I say hour, it could be a 5-minute thing, it could be a 1-minute thing. Like they're going to fire right now because they got all the bait they want. They've got them stirred up. So just understanding the environmental factors of what's going on throughout the day and how that's affecting the bait fish, whether it's bluegill or whether it's crawdads or whether it's, you know, your gizzard shad from your threadfin shad and all the sand, if there's sand bass in an area, okay, striper and sand bass in certain times of the year can positively trigger bass, and sometimes a year the bass are like, you know what, I don't want to mess with these dudes. And that's why some lakes you always catch them on the bank all year round, because a lot of times when there's a lot of sand bass and striper, if it's not a lot of clear water, if it's a lot of dirty water, in the wintertime, those bass just seem like they want to stay away from them. So like a keystone, for example, when it clears up, the bass will kind of do a little bit more of the suspended thing. But for the most part, because of the way that there's a lot of nutrition that's in the water and it stays dirty a lot of the time, and there's a lot of trash fish, those bass will stay. That's why it's so fun to fish keystone, because you can just stay on the rocks almost year round. And so there's just, you know, like I said, understanding those different environmental factors. When it comes to tournament fishermen, especially the niche that we are, we gotta zone in and like now. We need to know right now what they're doing, no guesses, and that's what all this is, you know, interpreting all this.
Oh, we were wrapping up the final week of January of shows for BTL, and I knew this was going to happen at some point in January. And as the Bassmaster Open schedule got closer and closer, that kind of first week of February, I was nervous we weren't going to get this in, and then I wasn't going to be available to do an interview, and he would end up doing a bunch of others. But I called him when I heard the rumors about this, and I said, dude, is this going down? Is this what's happening? And he wouldn't outright say it, but in a roundabout way, he said, yeah, and that is Chris Zaldain's move from Megabass to Guggen Squad and 13 Fishing and Bass Mafia. Major move, and I didn't realize how much of a dedicated fan base Chris had for, well, I knew he did, but it was insane the amount of feedback when this kind of started coming out that the guys, you know, the Mega Bass loyals and the big swim bait loyals had for Chris Zaldain going Guggen and 13. And I said, man, I really want to pick your brain. I want to go in depth on this. And as it got closer and closer, he's like, man, we got the video done. We got it. And I said, Tuesday, can we do it on Tuesday? And he said, yeah. And Tuesday night, he's like, oh, the video's still not out. And it went out at like 10 o'clock on Tuesday night, instantly had a ton of views. And then Tuesday morning, this was Chris Zaldain's first kind of major interview since unveiling the Guggen Baits boat wrap, and talked a little bit about what went on behind that decision, his plans moving forward, where he kind of sees the future of the sport and how he fits in it, and the moves that he felt were necessary to make at this time. So really appreciate Chris taking the time. He was actually at a Guggen Baits photo shoot with a bunch of the other guys who are sponsored by that company and are owners and part of that company. It took over an hour to really explain and went into depth the hows, the whys, the whens, and a really cool clip here of Zaldane announcing on BTL that he is officially now sponsored by the Guggen Squad.
Huge change, man. Huge change up. Here I am going on year number 10 already on the Bassmaster Elite Series. And so much has changed. Like, this sport has evolved. You and I were talking about it in the green room. This sport has evolved and changed so much in my time and space in the sport of bass fishing. Prior to me, it was the professional bass fishing model prior to me. So we're talking, late 90s, early 2000s. ESPN, the ESPN had a lot to do with projecting the sport of bass fishing to the world, to the bass fishing world, to the outdoorsman's world. And I was one of those kind of consumers and viewers. And, I wanted to be one of those guys on ESPN competing for $500,000 and all these giant logos and title sponsors galore and this and that. That was awesome. And that was something I aspired to be, in the early 2000s. And man, so much has changed since then. When I made it in 2012, that stuff was still kind of around and so awesome to be on TV and to be on a TV show 2 weeks after that tournament happened on Toledo Bend or whatever it was. That was so cool. And here we are in 2022, and all the fishing content is either consumed live or on YouTube. I mean, period. And here we are streaming live on BTL, and you have a lot of followers, and there's no better way to project what you're doing within the industry, within the sport, whether it be tournament finishes, how you caught them during the tournament, what your daily routine is pertaining to bass fishing. There's no better way to project that than on social media. And there is no question the Guggen Squad boys have absolutely crushed it on the social media side, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, their staple. Those guys did a really good job at bringing millions of eyeballs to the sport of bass fishing. You cannot take that away from them. I don't care. Hate on them all you want. But they brought more interested minds to bass fishing, more than what, I'll go ahead and say it, like what, Kevin and Skeet and Mike did, to me growing up, like it has changed. It has absolutely changed. And to pair up and to kind of, to hop on with that team, and it's just endless. The possibilities are endless as far as, for me, those millions of eyeballs they're obviously interested in the sport of bass fishing because they watch their YouTube videos over the last 5 or 6 years. They've watched them religiously, almost cult-like. But they are interested in bass fishing. They're watching these videos because they are interested in bass fishing. So for me, it's my job to come on and just kind of maybe expand their fishing knowledge a little bit. I've been doing this a long time. And I've seen from California to Florida, from South Texas all the way up to Michigan and Minnesota, I've seen a lot of different scenarios. And I feel like I bring a lot to their table, as far as elevating that interested mind, elevating that game.
January wrapped up with an interview with Joey Nania. And I'm 100% convinced that either I've been living under a rock or Joey Nania is probably the most underrated angler not on the Bassmaster Elite Series or the BPT or the Pro Circuit right now. His stats are insane, and I went through it on the Stowe. He's gone 19 consecutive opens without a 100th place finish. I think he had like 190, and then the next closest is like a 60. And we're talking anywhere from 180 to 230 boat field. So that is a lot of tournaments where he's not missing the boat, a lot where he is catching them. He actually won his first Bassmaster Open of his career was on Pickwick Lake this year, and then he almost won the next one. He finished second and in the next Central. But crazy Joey missed qualifying for the Elite Series by a point, like a single point. Like there was a double qualifier. I can't remember whether it was Centrals or the Southerns, but I think it was the Centrals. It was the Centrals. There's a double qualifier, and then there's a guy tied, and then he was 1 point back. That is drops of water. That's an ounce here. That's literally 1 ounce. And I had never interviewed him before. I had casually met him at Neely Henry. We both made the top 10 in an open there. And Joey was actually putting his motor toter on next to me. And I said, hey, man, good job. Great job this week. He said, thanks. I said, thanks. He had his family around him, which was a big theme of this interview, too. I said, man, he's got a lot of family that came in for, his top 10. I remember thinking that. And then they actually travel with him. So a really good support group. And really impressed with how he handled that and how he looks at everything that happens in his life in tournament fishing. He's a full-time guide. He's also on the Sweetwater TV show. He's a 2-time junior world champion in both age brackets. So he's been around it his whole life. Very competitive, very goal-oriented, driven, but has the ability to put things into perspective in timing, family, faith, and really be at peace with whatever happens on the water, which in past recent history has been a lot of good stuff for him. And I have no reason to believe, I believe he's fishing all 9 opens starting next week in Florida. So I'm sure that will continue for him, but highly impressed and really glad that I was able to close out the month of January with Joey Nania. Dude, legitimately, I don't know you very well personally. I said this yesterday on the show. I watch you drive past a lot. You seem to run a lot more than I do in the opens. I was always like, and there goes Joey. And there goes Joey again. And now Joey's over there. All the way back to Neely Henry in 2020. But I mean, you're at total peace with being literally 1 ounce away from starting the Elite Series in Florida in 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, I got home after that day on Grand, the last day on Grand, and I'm like, you know what? I just caught a bigger bag than I caught on the first day. I completely scrapped most of my game plan, and I had some other ideas in my head, but I scrapped my day one game plan, and I adjusted, and I did what I thought I could do to catch a bigger bag, and I caught a bigger bag, and I caught fish all day and had a blast doing it. And I'm like, if I make it, if there's meant to be 1 ounce of water on that scale and I'm meant to make it, I'll make it. And if not, I've got a great mission for this year. I've got 9 Bassmaster Opens, and I love fishing the Opens. And I'm traveling with a couple of young anglers. One's name is Wesley Gore and Zeke Gossett. And then my friend Connor Neal staying with us in Florida. So I look at that as an opportunity that I wouldn't have if I would have made the Elites this year. I'm going to be able to fish with them and mentor them in their first few years of the Opens. And these are kids that I've seen grow up that I've fished with. Zeke Gossett's my tournament partner here locally. And Wesley's a kid that I guided when he was 14, 15. And then he's taken this Alabama area by storm as a tournament angler, and he wins all the time, and he's a really great fisherman, and I feel like I'm here to help them and help mentor them and keep them humble, and because this is a sport where you can get an ego really easily, and that's something that I don't have that in fishing because I've been beat so many times. Fishing is one of those sports that you have to be a good loser to succeed in this sport. I love to win. I'm competitive. If I'm playing ping pong against you, I want to win. But when I lose, I'm going to say, man, good job. But, I didn't win. I don't mind losing. So I love to win, but I don't mind losing. And I think that's something that young anglers need to learn in this sport too. It's not all about winning. It's about how you handle yourself and how you take every opportunity and turn it to good. And if your focus is right and your focus is not on all these, worldly accomplishments and, I need to be better than this guy. And it's just, it's an inner peace, and it's something that helps me every day on the water and every day in life.
All right. Well, that is it for the month of January for BTL, the first month of solo shows. Like I opened the show with, I can't reiterate it enough. Thank you for the support, the comments, the downloads, the listens. It means a lot. Kind of pour my heart and soul into it. This is all I do, and I really wanted to do it right. And I'm looking forward to some exciting things that we're doing, that Brad and I are going to be doing following each open this year. Some of the ways that I am going to cover the Bassmaster Opens, all 9 of them, and then also cover the Bassmaster Elite Series and the BPT Pro Circuit and the MLF entire family of tournaments over there. really looking forward to getting into the season. January is a tough month because typically there's no tournaments. Typically you've got a lot of guys who want to make announcements but can't make announcements. They're stressed about getting all of their equipment, all of their stuff ready. There's not really any tournaments to talk about. A lot of the changes take place at the end of the year. And then once the tournaments kick off, you have way too much to talk about. But looking forward to a great month of February and beyond for BTL. And once again, I just want to thank you guys all along for being part of the show. And we will see you guys tomorrow.